Hello everyone, thank you for listening to my story. If you haven't fallen asleep yet, you might as well listen to this story, and maybe you will fall asleep soon. Before listening, please like and subscribe first. Of course, the premise is that you really like my content. If you have any thoughts or feelings, please leave a message below. Your opinions will really help me grow. Okay, enough chit-chat. Let's get started. At 3:17 in the morning, my phone was vibrating so hot under my pillow. When I touched the screen, the second hand of the mechanical watch was crossing the 3 scale. This number made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, as if it was pricked by the tip of an icicle. "Hawk, come to the bureau." Mark's voice was as rough as sandpaper. Dark web live broadcast, the highest priority. I pulled off my blindfold, and my watch left a red mark on my wrist. As he was pulling on his jeans, his knee knocked over the coffee cup, and the brown liquid spread out in twisted lines on the floor, looking an awful lot like the illegal transaction data stream that had been intercepted last week. The technical room on the second underground floor of the police station was blindingly bright. The projector cast the dark web images on the wall. A sealed warehouse, an iron stand, and a spotlight on the back of a woman's neck. There was a faded tattoo on her left wrist, the number 72, like a rusty needle poking into the skin. The title Hunter Theater jumped in the corner of the screen, and the countdown showed 69 hours, 58 minutes and 12 seconds. The signal jumps through 23 layers of encryption. Intern Jarkai's voice trembled. "Conventional means can't catch up." I didn't respond. My fingers typed out a string of code on the keyboard that only I knew. The startup program of Raven lit up with a faint blue light after a retinal scan. "This is the weapon I spent 3 years hiding," swearing to myself in front of my sister's grave. The system boot took 1 minute and 17 seconds. When the ticking sound of Morse code leaked out from the speaker, Yaokai's coffee cup fell to the ground with a clang. "The lies from 5 years ago haven't ended yet." I typed the translation on the screen, my knuckles pressing against the hot computer case. The door opened with a sound like a knife. Mark leaned against the doorframe, the police badge flashing coldly on his collar. "Rose Garden." I looked up. The red bloodshot in his eyes was more dense than 3 years ago. That year his informant had his throat slit in the alley, and in the body's arms was half a notebook full of clues about the Rose Garden. "Check the case files from that year." I turned my chair, and a yellowed photo popped up on the screen. The informant was wearing a police academy uniform, smiling with his arm around Mark's shoulder. "There's a coffee stain on the edge of the photo that looks exactly like the one on my floor." "Background noise," Mark said suddenly. He leaned over my computer and pointed his finger at the audio analysis graph. "The frequency of infrasound is 22 Hz, which is commonly seen in vibrations in water." I called up the port area map and paused my mouse near English Bay. The packet tracking window suddenly exploded with garbled characters. The originally clear IP path seemed to be muddied by water, and the frequency of node changes was so fast that it made people dizzy. Human interference. I squeezed my mechanical watch, and the second hand moved louder than usual. The live screen suddenly flashed. The imprisoned woman looked up. There is a teardrop mole under her left eye, which looks bluish-gray under the spotlight. It is Claire Novak, the woman who dared to put the sexual assault video of the mayor's son on the front page of the West Coast Times. "If you can see me." Her voice was like sandpaper on metal, nails scraping against the wall. "Remember these numbers. Z5217. The screen went black for 3 seconds. When it got brighter, the wall reflected mirrored text, and the distorted letters looked like crawling snakes. Claire's eyes suddenly froze, looking straight through the camera, as if I could see the hair on the back of my neck standing up. "The system has recorded hidden data," Raven's prompt sounded in my ears. I quickly cut to the background, where binary code was scrolling like a string of unopened time bombs. Mark patted my shoulder. "Want a cup of coffee?" The warmth of his hand seeped through my shirt, like a warm paperweight. I shook my head. The mechanical watch showed 4:33 in the morning. The photo of the mirrored text was still shaking on the screen, and the distorted letters reminded me of the reflections on the water that I saw on the ferry when I was a child. When the ship blew the horn, the waves would crumple the letters into a ball. Raven's prompt box popped up. "Binary fragment requires manual verification." I stared at Claire's last look, and my Adam's apple moved. The number 72 tattoo on her left wrist suddenly became clear, as if it was written in fresh blood. It started to get white outside the window. The photo of the mirrored text glowed cold blue in the morning light. When I reached out to touch the keyboard, I suddenly remembered a sentence in the closing report of the Rose Garden case 5 years ago. "Key evidence is missing, and the whereabouts of the main culprit's womb and children remain a mystery." The Raven's alert sounded again. This time it was a string of unnamed files. The file name was garbled, but I recognized the characters. It was the serial number of an abandoned ferry in Vancouver Harbor. The second hand of the mechanical watch passes the 12 mark. When I pressed the save button, I heard the sound of a cleaner pushing a cart in the corridor. The metal wheels rolled over the ground, emitting vibrations with the same frequency as the infrasonic sound in the background sound of the live broadcast. When I dragged the photo of the mirrored text into the optical character recognition (OCR) recognition box, the minute hand of the mechanical watch just passed 12. The blue light from the screen made my eyes hurt, but those twisted letters seemed to have hooks, pulling my fingers to keep typing on the keyboard. "Reverse mirror," I said to the air. The words Claire wrote in front of the camera were reversed, just like practicing calligraphy in front of a mirror. But this time, it was not a simple left-right flip. The arc of each letter had an additional 15-degree tilt angle. I called up the font library of the Maritime Academy, and when the 7th folder popped up, the hairs on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. Pacific Coast Pilot's Manual. An old book that is so unpopular that even the police database only has a scanned version. I turned to page 42. The surface of the paper was the yellow of old craft paper. There was a line of italics sandwiched between the lead typesetting. The water level is below 2.1 meters at low tide. The ventilation duct in Area B of the abandoned ferry terminal has a diameter of 75 centimeters. 052 The number Claire said while scraping the wall suddenly exploded in my mind. I straightened up suddenly, and the chair made a harsh noise as it scraped against the ground. EU is the month. 5 is the date. 2.1 is the water level. 7 is the pipe diameter. She is giving the coordinates. The port map expanded on the screen, and I marked 3 abandoned docks that met the criteria. B12, C7. The mechanical watch showed 5:17 in the morning, and there were 66 hours and 43 minutes left until the end of the 72-hour countdown. Is the system interference still going on? I knocked on Mark's desk. He was drinking cold coffee from a disposable cup, and the dark circles under his eyes looked like he had been punched. There are 3 abnormal IP addresses in the firewall log. Every time a node is traced, it jumps to the Vatican Library's official website. He crushed the paper cup. It seems like an insider setup. I didn't respond. When I turned back to my workstation, there was a note under my mousepad. Manual tracking using Internet Service Provider, ISP logs. It was written in Raven's handwriting. We had agreed on this method of delivering messages during the Rose Garden case 5 years ago. The local ISP logs fill 3 monitors. I compared the traffic during the live broadcast period one by one, and my fingers became numb from typing on the keyboard. When the 17th record popped up, the screen suddenly went black. The main power switch has tripped. Mark's voice came from the corridor. I groped in the dark to unplug the hard drive, and as soon as my fingertips touched the connector, the backup power supply started up with a buzz. The moment the screen lit up, all the analytical data turned into garbled characters. Someone deleted my files. Raven's reward prompt popped up at this time. 99.99 Canadian dollars. 12.34 Canadian dollars. 50.01 Canadian dollars. The amount combinations jumped on the screen, and I took out the code book I carried with me. 99 corresponds to the 7th position in the alphabet, Q. 12 corresponds to the 3rd position, C. And 50 corresponds to the 11th position, K. Together they form GCK, our agreed coordinate conversion coding method. The pen pokes holes in the paper as you calculate longitude and latitude. GCK corresponds to 491630. I measured it on the port map, and it fell right within the red circle of Pierce. Apply for permission to operate. I slapped the coordinates on Mark's desk. He was looking at the newly issued case transfer document, with the cover stamped with the National Security Bureau. The superiors have taken over. He pushed up his glasses. A special task force will take over tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The data was deleted. The system was interfered with, and they're handing it over now. I dug my nails into my palms. The Rose Garden case was handed over in the same way 5 years ago, and then the key evidence was gone. Mark said nothing. His pen tapped out a regular rhythm on the document, a habit he had when he was anxious.
I suddenly remembered the words in the case report 5 years ago. The whereabouts of the principal culprit's uterine children remains a mystery, and the back of my neck began to feel hot again.
At 6:17 in the morning, I shoved my service gun into my ankle holster. The mechanical watch showed that there were 65 hours and 43 minutes left to 72 hours. Pier C7 is at the westernmost end of the port, and is marked on the map as abandoned, and the sound of the rusting iron door was particularly loud in the silence. I walked close to the wall, my shoes grinding over broken glass. The warehouse complex looked like a row of black teeth. The innermost windows were all sealed with iron plates, and only a thin ray of light leaked from the vents on the roof. I raised my phone to take a picture of the vent, and the ambient sound analysis software started at the same time. The match is 92%. Raven's voice came from the headset. It is consistent with the infrasonic frequency of the live broadcast background sound. I reached for the tactical flashlight at my waist, and was about to shine it through the crack in the door, when I suddenly felt a chill on the back of my neck. Someone is watching me. The footsteps were light, like a cat walking on its paw pads on concrete. When I turned around, I knocked over an iron barrel, and the clanging sound scared away a few crows. The flashlight beam pierced the darkness and shone on my face. The moment I saw the other person's shoes clearly, hand-sewn cowhide, Martin boots with a patch of leather on the left heel. You shouldn't have come alone. The voice was low and a little hoarse with a metallic texture. My fingers curled around the handle of the gun, but the other party did not move, and the beam of light covered my eyes steadily, as if confirming something. The sound of the mechanical watch's second hand suddenly became deafening, and I could hear my heart beating so fast that it was about to burst out of my throat. There was a sudden flash of light from the vent. It's very similar to the flickering when the live broadcast screen switches. I was just about to exert force on the gun when a chill ran up my spine at the back of my neck. The other person's hand clamped my wrist like a pair of pliers and twisted it behind my back. Pain exploded along my nerves. The phone fell to the ground with a bang. The flashlight rolled into the gutter, and darkness instantly enveloped us. Agent Hawk. A hoarse metallic voice brushed past my ear. You are more impatient than in the surveillance video, Monitor. I gritted my teeth and tried to kick his knee, but he blocked it with his legs. The patched leather of my Martin boots rubbed against my trouser legs. The frequency of the friction sound was exactly the same as the background sound of the director's control console in the live broadcast. Let go. I lowered my voice, cold sweat soaking the back of my neck. Assaulting a police officer is enough to get you in prison for 10 years. He laughed, his chest vibrating and hitting my back. People who should have been in prison 10 years ago would have died in prison long ago. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly let go of her hand. I staggered 2 steps and turned around, only to see him walking into the shadow of the warehouse with his back to me. Moonlight leaked through the cracks in the iron plate, revealing a scar on the back of his neck, the same location as his mother's tattoo in the Rose Garden main criminal's file. A note. He threw something metallic and it landed at his feet. I want to save Claire and solve the last puzzle she hid. I bent down to pick it up. It was a folded piece of tin foil. When I unfolded it, there was only a line of numbers on it. The mechanical watch showed 6:28. When I got back to the police station, Mark was piling coffee cups on my desk. "Where did you go last night?" he frowned. "The special forces came to take over this morning. Your cell phone is unreachable." I didn't respond and slammed the tin foil in front of the computer. Raven's notification tone exploded in the headset. Binary to ASCII code. Character R.
Mark came closer. Is it related to the number carved on the wall during Claire's live broadcast?
I pulled up the live video. At the end of the second level, Claire scratched a series of numbers on the concrete wall with her fingernails. 7. The alphabetical positions correspond to G, W. But now there's an extra R, like a puzzle piece stuck in the crack. Wait. I suddenly pressed pause. When the live broadcast screen switched, a line of garbled text flashed in the lower right corner. Raven, analyze this interference wave. Analyzing. 37%. 79%. Match successful. The electronic voice of the artificial intelligence rose. It is a wave format header file. My heart skipped a beat. I plugged in the external hard drive, and the gibberish began to transform into sound waves. First there was the sound of electricity, followed by the woman sobbing. "I'm sorry. I really didn't expect them to move so quickly." "Claire?" Mark leaned closer to the speaker. There were hurried footsteps in the background, and the man shouted, "They are chasing. The photos must not be." Bang. The moment the gunshot rang out, I felt cold all over. This is a recording of the death scene of the Rose Garden informant 5 years ago. The case report that year stated no eyewitness testimony. But now Claire's crying, "I'm sorry," is as clear as if it were ringing in her ears. The third level begins. A live broadcast interface suddenly popped up on the computer. Claire sat in front of the mirror, the 72 tattoo on her left wrist bleeding. She looked up, and the reflection in the mirror spoke at the same time as her. 5 years ago on April 7, in order to grab the headlines, I saved the informant's photo in an unencrypted cloud drive. Her voice was soft, but it hit me like a hammer in the stomach. The live broadcast comments scrolled wildly, and the reward special effects of the Silence of the Lambs filled the screen. All of them were bloody roses. Raven, track the funding flow of Silence of the Lambs. I typed quickly. Reverse tracing is in progress. A cross-border transfer was discovered, and the final recipient is Wyland International Logistics. The AI paused. It is related to the company owned by the main culprit of the Rose Garden. Wyland, Lucas's last name. Mark's pen slammed on the table. So this isn't revenge. It's phishing. They want to lure Claire into revealing clues. I nodded, my finger hovering over the Submit Report button. The system suddenly popped up a red box. Insufficient authority, special service team verification required. Shit. I slammed my computer shut and pulled out my old laptop. Raven's green progress bar climbed on the screen. Live source positioning, 99%. Locked on C7 dock warehouse. Error range 0.5 meter. The mechanical watch shows 47 hours and 53 minutes remaining. "Eleanor," Mark called me. "The Secret Service is here." I didn't look back. In the live broadcast, Claire was writing the last character on the mirror, with blood. When she looked up, the red light of the camera was reflected in her pupils. "I know you saw it. Next it's their end." The moment the screen went black, I touched the holster on my ankle. The tin foil was crumpled in the palm of my hand, and the 1010101 was still hot. The light from the warehouse vent flickered again. I squatted next to a trash can in the back alley of C7 warehouse, holding the rain-soaked note between my fingertips. "Welcome to my theater, Agent Hawk." The handwriting was printed, with a dried rose petal pressed in the lower right corner, exactly the same as the reward special effects of the Silence of the Lambs in the live broadcast. A chill ran down the back of my neck. I crumpled the note into a ball and stuffed it into my trouser pocket, then lowered the brim of my hat and walked toward the alley. 10 minutes ago, when I touched the iron door of the warehouse, this thing was stuck in the keyhole as if waiting for me to pick it up. The mirrored wall of the apartment elevator reflected the dark corners of my eyes. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the police special task force was still looking for me all over the world. It was because I turned off my work phone and hacked into their positioning system. "Raven, start the backup server." I kicked away the instant noodle box at my feet, and the laptop on the coffee table lit up with a faint blue light. When the green progress bar of the artificial intelligence climbed over 99%, the mechanical watch clicked and jumped to 4712, which was 7 minutes faster than I estimated. A warning pop-up window popped up on the screen. 3 unauthorized IP accesses were detected. Really? I turned off the main power switch of the apartment and used the cold light of my cell phone to dig out the metal box under the bed. Inside was a modified satellite network card and a fake IT maintenance badge. He had picked it up last time when he was helping the technical department repair the surveillance camera. The door to the police station's underground data center beeped. I was wearing gray work clothes and had a fault repair form tucked under my arm. The security guard glanced at my work badge and waved to let me pass. The cold air in the server room made my teeth chatter. I bent over and crawled into the innermost cabinet. My fingertips quickly ran over the interface on the back of the server. "Do you need help?" My heart skipped a beat. I looked up and saw the cleaning lady standing behind me, holding a mop, her silver hair turning white in the cold light. "The fan in cabinet number 17 is making an unusual noise." I put on a professional smile. "Why don't you go to the lounge and have a cup of coffee first? It will only take half an hour." She stared at my badge on my chest for 3 seconds, then turned around and muttered, "That guy took an hour to fix it last time." I waited until her footsteps disappeared down the hallway and quickly inserted the portable hard drive. Raven's code flooded across the screen like a green tide, and the deleted IP tracking records began to revive one by one. All of them were financial transactions between the reward account and Wyland International Logistics during the 3-day live broadcast. "Duplicate geotag matched," Raven's synthesized voice sounded in the headset. "Silver Coast Clinic, East Vancouver." I paused. I remember Mark mentioned the Yinan Clinic during the anti-pornography and anti-illegal publication campaign last year. Their medical qualifications were checked. On the surface, it is a high-end private hospital, but it has a very strong background. The phone vibrated in my pocket. "It's Emily Chu's number." I quickly exited the system before answering the call. The moment the cabinet closed again, the aunt's footsteps approached again. "Agent Hawk." Emily's voice was like an icicle. "Did you know that the Secret Service is looking for you? I need the financial flow of the Silver Coast Clinic." I avoided her question and said, "It is related to the funding chain of Silence of the Lamb." There was silence for 2 seconds on the other end of the phone. "You have exceeded your authority." Wyland International Logistics. I opened my notebook and pulled up the fund flowchart that Raven had just generated. The company that held shares on behalf of the main culprit of Rose Garden 5 years ago is now actually controlled by Lucas Welland, and 70% of the rewards for Silence of the Lambs eventually flowed to the offshore account of Silver Coast Clinic. "Send it to me." Her voice suddenly became softer. 10 minutes later, Starbucks at the pier, 3rd booth by the window. When I hung up the phone, the mechanical watch jumped. I stuffed the hard drive into my socks and nodded to him as I passed the security room. He smiled at me while holding up his thermos cup, probably thinking I was an enthusiastic employee. who had spent 2 hours repairing the computer. The air conditioning in Starbucks is too strong. When I turned the notebook toward Emily, her fingertips left white marks on the coffee cup. This is impossible. She flipped through the fund flow chart. The legal representative of Silver Coast Clinic is a charity. How could it be? Because the Rose Garden has never been interrupted. I pressed the touchpad and called up the recording of Claire's live broadcast of the 3rd level. What she wrote on the mirror was not a password, but coordinates. The difference between the longitude and latitude of the place where the informant was killed 5 years ago is... Emily's pupils shrank. You mean, a new nest? I interrupted her. The Raven has used image recognition to match the cracks in the wall, which matches the structural diagram of the abandoned container yard at the port. She suddenly grabbed my wrist and said, "Promise me not to act on your own. I'll apply for a search warrant. It will take no more than 3 hours." I pulled my hand back. The hands of the mechanical watch pointed to 46:05, a full 50 minutes faster than the agreed 3 hours. "I promise," I said, clenching my fingers under the table. When we left Starbucks, it started to rain heavily again. I had to go around 3 blocks before I could get a taxi. The country music the driver played was so loud that it made my brain hurt. The phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an encrypted message from Raven. Container Yard Area B. Surveillance is black. The entrance is behind Container 30. I stared out the window at the receding streetlights, the windshield wipers drawing blurry arcs on the glass. The ticking of the mechanical watch drowned out the sound of the rain, and each sound sounded like knocking on my temple. The iron gate of the container yard was ajar. I huddled in the shadow of the truck and fished for the gun in my pants pocket. The humid sea breeze brought the smell of rust into my nose, and in the distance came the whistle of a cargo ship, long and hoarse, like some kind of warning. My phone suddenly vibrated. I looked down and saw a line of words on the screen. "Be careful, they are waiting for you too. Sendo Raven." The light leaking through the gap in the iron door looked like a wound. I moved along the wall and touched my waist with my fingertips. The micro-drone was still there, and its metal shell hurt my skin. Raven said the surveillance camera was black, but the message "they are waiting for you too" was still burning the phone screen. The drone buzzed into the night sky. I stared at the real-time image on my watch screen. 7 red dots were moving in the shadows of the container pile. Infrared sensor. The under-maintenance warning sign hanging at the main entrance swayed in the night wind, and there was a thermal imaging camera hidden behind it. No wonder Raven let us go through the ventilation duct. The vents on the rear of Box 13 are narrower than I thought. I took off my coat and tucked the gun into my waistband, tearing off pieces of skin as my nails scraped against the rusted iron mesh. Drops of blood dripped onto the concrete floor, and the salty and wet smell was quickly blown away by the sea breeze. The musty smell in the pipe made me cough. I covered my mouth and listened to my heartbeat echoing off the metal pipe wall. My knees hit the iron plate when I landed. I crouched beneath the console and looked up at the monitor. Claire was chained to a metal frame under the spotlight of the central cell. The 72 tattoo on her left wrist was tinged with blue, and she was staring at the mirror on the wall. What was reflected in the mirror was not her face, but the red dots of more than 20 cameras, like a group of eyes ready to strike. "They all think they are messengers of justice." A male voice exploded from the loudspeaker above my head. I looked up suddenly. The speaker on the wall was vibrating. "In fact, they are just chess pieces. It's Lucas." I took out the signal blocker I carried with me. The wound on the back of my hand was bleeding, making the metal shell of the blocker slippery. The bitrate of the live stream on the console was jumping, and the number of tips from viewers was soaring wildly. The ID of the Silence of the Lambs was at the top of the list, with 3 zeros after the amount. As soon as the blocker was inserted into the interface, the alarm sounded. Red lights were spinning overhead. I knocked over a chair, and the surveillance screen crackled black. I heard the sound of leather shoes behind me. Very slowly, as if they were counting my heartbeats. Agent Hawk Lucas's voice was just behind my right ear. "Think you can save her?" As I turned, I knocked over the console and the keyboard hit my instep. He held up the remote control, pressed his index finger on the red button, and smiled. "This is just part of the trial." There was a sound of metallic friction coming from the direction of the cell. I rushed to the window and saw that the floor beneath Claire's feet was tilting, revealing the water tank below, which was glowing coldly. She looked up at me and said, "Run," with her mouth. The sound of the chain hitting the metal frame was like a death knell. Bang! Gunshots rang out from outside. I was lying on the ground and saw the iron door being knocked open. Emily rushed in with a gun raised, followed by special police in bulletproof vests. Lucas dropped the remote control to the ground. I rushed over and grabbed his wrist. His nails dug into the wound on the back of my hand, and it hurt so much that I almost gave up. "Water valve." Claire's voice was muffled, and she had already slid to the edge of the tilted floor. I pushed Lucas away, picked up a chair, and smashed it against the control panel of the water tank. The back of my hand went numb as the electricity ran through the back of the chair and the valve closed with a click. I was cutting Claire's chains with my tactical knife when Emily's handcuffs clicked around Lucas's wrists. She suddenly grabbed my hand, and there was a hard object in her palm, a memory card, real evidence. Her voice was as light as a sigh. "They don't want me to die. They want me to pass on false clues. The sirens are getting closer." Claire suddenly broke away from me and rushed to the console that was still sparking. "Take him away," she shouted, her face stained with blood. "I'll cover you." "Claire." Emily grabbed my arm, and the SWAT carried Lucas out. I took a last look at her back. She was stuffing something into the gap of the console, her movements similar to the Rose Garden informant she wrote about in the report 5 years ago, the young man who was killed to protect her. The air conditioning in the police station's technical room was set too low. I stared at the computer screen. The moment the memory card was inserted, a blue light flashed and the video started playing automatically. The picture was blurry for 3 seconds, then clear. It was the face of a strange man. He sat on a swivel chair with a one-way glass behind him, inside which was a cell exactly the same as the one in the container yard just now. He smiled at the camera and tapped his fingers on the table where there was a mechanical watch, the same one on my wrist. The video went black with a beep. I took off my headphones and heard Mark's voice coming from the hallway. "Hawk." The forensics department said Lucas had 23 missed calls on his phone, all from the same number. I looked down at my watch. It was exactly the same as when he promised Emily in Starbucks that he would not act on his own. My knuckles burned against the metal casing as I pushed the memory card into the reader. The screen flashed blue light 3 times, and suddenly a long string of encrypted codes popped up. Exactly the same code Claire used when reporting on Rose Garden 5 years ago. Raven sounded in my ear, and the first layer was automatically analyzed. The coordinates of new hideouts, organ trade ledgers, and watermarked political and business emails hit the screen like a rainstorm. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I stared at the sign, Port of Vancouver Warehouse 17. That was Lucas's logistics center, where we had just handcuffed him. "Hawk!" Emily pushed open the door to the technical room, her police badge dangling at her collarbone. "The Attorney General wants a hearing now." She snatched the USB drive from my hand and dug her nails into the old wound on the back of my hand. "The Federation already knows about this." I followed her down the corridor. Mark poked his head out of the interrogation room. Lucas's voice penetrated the soundproof glass. "You can't save the next one." I didn't stop. Mark's voice was left behind. "Han Baker is here." In the conference room, an FBI agent leaned against a conference table, gun holsters protruding from his suit cuffs. He pushed the tablet computer over, and on the screen were a dozen dark web live broadcast rooms, all showing people of different skin colors hanging on iron frames. "Hunter Theater is a beta version of the echo chamber," he said. They specifically pick on people with original sin. Journalists, police, informants, and use revenge as a cover to broadcast executions live. I stared at one of the live broadcast titles, Lawyer's Trial, Death of Drug Dealer.
Ian Baker tapped the tablet computer and said, "The account books you found are just the tip of the iceberg. The echo chamber has nodes in 37 countries, and the capital chain can circle the Earth 3 times.
What about Lucas? Emily asked.
Chess pieces, Han Baker said. Real chess players are watching the live broadcast. The smell of hospital disinfectant made my throat tight. Claire was lying in the intensive care unit, with the 72 tattoo on her left wrist half covered by gauze. She heard the noise and her eyelashes trembled. "You are here." I pulled up a chair and sat down. She stretched her hand out from under the sheets, with a folded note in her palm. 5 years ago, I didn't leak the information. Her voice was like sandpaper cleaning glass. Someone hacked my camera, the same encryption method used in live broadcasts now. I clenched the note, the corner of the paper digging into my palm. "So you got caught on purpose?" They asked me to pass on false clues and lead the police to the abandoned dock. She smiled, with blood scabs at the corners of her eyes. But I inserted the real coordinates into the console, cross-checked with warehouse number 17 in the memory card. "I can wipe out half of the rose garden." She suddenly grabbed my wrist. The mechanical watch poked her knuckles. "Promise me, don't stop." I nodded. She let go of my hand and closed her eyes. "Go check the last message from Raven."
When I returned to the technical room, the Raven avatar was flashing grey on the dark web forum.
The last message was sent 3 hours ago. "See the world for me." I sat in front of the screen for a long time, until Mark knocked on the door frame. His IP is located in Mexico City, and he closed his account 3 days ago. "It's Claire's photography partner," I said softly. Mark was startled. I opened the drawer and saw a yellowed photo inside. 2 young men were standing on the dock holding cameras. The boy had a red mole on the back of his neck, which was the same as the special code pattern used by Raven when giving rewards. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I was disassembling the Raven system in the laboratory. The new offline module is soldered onto the main board, allowing it to run for 48 hours when disconnected from the internet. Mark came in with coffee and watched me stuff the portable device into the tactical bag. "Are we going to chase the North American node?" Dan Baker said that the echo chamber has a branch in New York. I plugged in the last data cable. Emily got an interstate search warrant. He said nothing, but pointed to the watch on my wrist. We bowed our heads at the same time. 4:05, exactly the same time as when we promised him not to act on his own at Starbucks. As daybreak approached, I stood by the task force window. The string of lights at the harbor looked like broken glass, and the whistle of the ferry mixed with that of the police sirens. The computer suddenly beeped, and I turned around. The unread message on the echo chamber forum was flashing. The moment I clicked on it, the title of the post popped up. "The next theater will open in New York." The cursor dances on the title like someone's heartbeat. At 4:17 in the morning, the second hand of my mechanical watch had just skipped the 3rd mark, when the screen in the data center suddenly flashed. Under the new post in the echo chamber forum, a string of characters appeared below the New York Theater title that was originally scrolling. The letters and numbers were like dice blown by the wind. Ataisa G2H9K5. I moved closer, and my nose almost touched the screen. This was not garbled, but the spacing between them was somewhat abnormal. Raven. Analysis. I tapped on the metal casing of the portable device. The offline module that was soldered on when I disassembled the motherboard 3 days ago was still warm. In the intervals between the humming of the fan, the green progress bar climbed to Tor node address. 23 layers of encryption. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up when the synthesized voice sounded. The same number of encryption layers used by Claire's live broadcast. The phone vibrated in my trouser pocket. Han Baker's name popped up on the screen, and in the background was the noise of the FBI office. The Federation has marked the echo chamber as a key target of attention. The New York branch needs you. Are you going in an official capacity? I touched the tactical bag which contained a portable version of Raven, a core module deliberately left behind when disassembling the motherboard, which can resist electromagnetic interference. It's too conspicuous, he said. I'm going there as an independent cybersecurity consultant. There's a flight leaving in 2 hours. I looked down at my watch. 4:28. Exactly the same time as yesterday when I promised Mark not to act on my own. I landed at Kennedy Airport at 10 in the morning. Town was waiting for me at the arrival gate, holding a sign that read Hawk Consultant, looking like a ride-hailing driver who had picked up the wrong person. He didn't shake my hand. He handed me an access card and said, "Isabel Gray is on the 17th floor. She's a cybersecurity consultant for New York City. She's a former member of the Deep Web Hunter Forum." I told her background, and Han raised an eyebrow and asked, "Did you do your homework?" The glass door on the 17th floor was locked. I knocked on the door 3 times and heard a metallic clanging sound from inside. The door opened, and a woman stood there, holding a stack of hard drives. She wore blue light-blocking glasses on her left eye, and a faded Deep Web Hunter badge on her right shoulder. The metal shell of the portable Raven glows coldly under the light. She squatted down, ran her finger over the motherboard interface, and asked, "Is this an offline module?" I called up the analysis results. Her fingers tapped quickly on the keyboard. A string of garbled characters first appeared on the screen, and then reassembled in an instant, exactly the same as the tour address I saw in Vancouver. "I've seen this too." Her voice dropped. 3 months ago, an underground server farm in Manhattan rented out a large amount of bandwidth. The clients were anonymous and used Bitcoin mixing accounts, so there was no clue at all. Mixed accounts? I frowned. After being obfuscated through multiple transfers, Bitcoin is usually untraceable. She tapped the screen and said, "But this time the node points to Area B of the farm." My watch read 11.5 minutes when the tracking program started. The coffee that Isabel had placed on the table had gone cold, and my throat was a little tight. The same feeling I had when I was waiting for the Raven analysis results in the technical room when Claire was imprisoned. "Connection successful," she said suddenly. A black interface popped up on the screen with a red dot in the center. The coordinates were displayed as Lower Manhattan, 14th Street, 3rd underground floor. "Is this a live feed?" She nodded and said, "But there is no content." It seems like she is waiting for something. At this moment, the prompt sound suddenly rang. A private message box popped up and the sender was shown as Director, "Welcome to the second act. Are you ready to be an audience member?" Attached is a photo. Claire's recorder lay on the black velvet, its metal casing gleaming with a cold glow. It was the one she used for her last call before she disappeared, and I had touched it in her ward 3 days ago. Isabel took a deep breath and said, "This recorder was registered by the New York Physical Evidence Division 3 days ago. They said it was picked up at the Brooklyn dock." I stared at the screen, my fingers drumming unconsciously on the table. I can hear my own heartbeat amid the ticking of the mechanical watch. "Mixed accounts," Isabel said suddenly. "Although we can't track down the account owner, we may be able to reverse the transaction path." Her words were interrupted by the sound of an alarm. The red dot on the screen began to flash, and the live broadcast source address was being destroyed. I grabbed my tactical bag and the clock read 11:17. This time, there is no 72-hour countdown, but I know the chess game has just begun. I stared at Isabel's fingers tapping away at the keyboard. The chain of transactions in the mixed accounts was like a ball of yarn being pulled, drawing a distorted trajectory on the screen. 7th jump. She pressed the enter key. The Bitcoin circulated through 7 anonymous wallets and finally flowed into. The cursor stopped at the transfer record of St. Mary's Medical Center. I gripped the buckle of the tactical bag tightly, and the metal buckle hurt my palm. The files of the Rose Garden case 5 years ago surged in his memory, and Jonathan Blair's name suddenly popped into his mind. The surgeon who removed organs from trafficked girls was acquitted due to insufficient evidence and subsequently disappeared. "Check the legal representative of this hospital," I said in a low voice. Isabel's fingers paused as she pulled up the registration information. The man in the photo had grey hair and his eyes were half closed behind his gold-rimmed glasses. It was Jonathan Blair. Check Blair's background." I grabbed the phone. "Check it now." 3 minutes later, the voice of FBI coordinator Han Baker came in. Blair and Lucas Wyland were in the same Toronto orphanage from 2008 to 2010. At that time, Blair's sister was trafficked by the Rose Garden, and her body was found at the Montreal dock. I clenched my hand around the phone even tighter. Lucas's mother is the main culprit of the Rose Garden and Blair's sister is the victim. Two people whose lives were ruined by the same web, and now have become allies. The sound of an alarm suddenly cut through the air. Garbled characters popped up on Isabel's screen. She quickly switched interfaces, and the ripples of encrypted voice danced on the oscilloscope. "The New York theater will be launched in 3 days. The target is the rat that leaked the data." The sound of the mechanical voice changer hurt my eardrums. "Identify the source of the voice print." I moved closer to the screen. Isabel's fingertips hovered on the pause button. "Wait." She suddenly raised her head, her pupils contracted. "The target code is Raven." The blood rushed to my head instantly. I yanked open my computer bag and pulled up the access log for the Raven system. In the scrolling code, a line of virtual reward ID used for testing was particularly eye-catching. It was the one I accidentally uploaded to the echo chamber database 3 days ago. "They know that Raven is a police officer," Isabel said softly. I closed the computer, and the metal case made a crisp click sound. The watch showed 3:17 p.m., and there were still 68 hours until the launch of New York Theater. Enough to set up a trap. "I need technical support," disguised as Silence of the Lambs. I turned to Isabel. "Can you fake access to the hospital server?" She gave a cruel smile. "Santa Maria uses an old system from 10 years ago. Even my interns can't break through the firewall." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a cafe in Lower Manhattan, and Isabel's instructions came through my headset. "Now enter the backup port number, and be careful to avoid the main router." The laptop screen lit up, and a list of files on the hospital server appeared before his eyes. I quickly navigated to the project files, and hovered my mouse over the NY Theater folder. Click. The layout diagram was spread out in the center of the screen, a 3-story underground structure. Surveillance blind spots marked in red, escape routes marked in green. The layout was strikingly similar to the warehouse where Claire was imprisoned. "Got it," I whispered, my finger hovering over the download button. Suddenly the screen flashed a blue light. All windows closed at the same time, and a line of blood-red words popped up on the black background. "Thank you for sending the key." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I slammed the power button, but the computer made a sharp buzzing sound like a stuck gear. The phone in my trouser pocket vibrated. It was an unread text message from an unknown sender. "You are not an audience, you are an actor." I stared at the fading red light on the screen, the ticking of my watch growing louder in my ears. Blair and Lucas's revenge web is trapping me in it. Outside the cafe's glass window, the neon lights of St. Mary's Medical Center flickered in the twilight. I took out a tactical pen and drew a cross in the blank space on the layout diagram. That was what they thought was the key, and also the gift I was going to send back. The phone vibrated again in my palm. This time it was a message from Isabel. "The backup agreement template has been sent to your email." The corners of my mouth rose slightly. The actors they want. Then let them see who is the real director. My knuckles ached from pressing against the keyboard as I compressed the forged alternative live broadcast protocol into an encrypted package. Isabel's voice exploded in the headset. "The access control system of the 3rd underground floor of Santa Maria has been taken over. You have 7 minutes. 7 minutes was enough for me to get to the staff passage from the back door of the hospital. The white coat was borrowed from the laundry room, and the face in the badge photo was replaced with artificial intelligence. Isabel said that Blair's technical team only recognizes permission codes, not living people. The card reader made a beeping sound. The moment the metal door opened, the musty smell mixed with the burning smell of electricity hit me in the face. The third underground floor is darker than the layout map. The emergency lights are only turned on every 10 meters, turning the corridor into an intermittent blood bar. The combination lock in the control room flashed green. I punched in the temporary code Isabel had given me, and the door hinges creaked on rust. The first thing that catches your eye is the surveillance screen on the wall. In the 27 frames, a man in a hospital gown was tied to an operating table, with blood oozing from the marks on his wrists. That was the FBI undercover, the missing target that Han Baker had reported just this morning. This is not an operating room, I whispered into the headset. The control console in the center was flashing a faint blue light. It had lighting controls, multi-camera switching buttons, a real-time barrage screen for audience rewards, and even a teleprompter. The spotlights hanging from the ceiling cast circular spots of light on the ground, just like the live broadcast scene when Claire was imprisoned. They were creating a death stage. I took out the black chip hidden in my sleeve. It was the micro-monitoring module of the Raven. The moment the chip was attached to the console motherboard interface, a current noise came from the earphones, followed by Isabel's exclamation, "Communication is connected." I quickly retreated to the blind spot of the surveillance. The console's display suddenly lit up, and Jonathan Blair's face appeared on the screen. He was wearing a neat suit, but there was a dark red stain on his collar, which looked like blood. "Mr. Wyland, the equipment test is complete," he said to the air. There was a vague sound of electricity in the background, followed by the metallic male voice that I had heard in the Hunter Theater. "Before the live broadcast begins, let's show our special guest a surprise. It's Lucas Wyland." I clenched my tactical pen. Blair's camera shook slightly, revealing the wall behind him. On it were photos of Claire and screenshots of my operations when tracking the echo chamber, with the key steps circled in red pen. "She's smarter than I thought." Lucas's voice suddenly became clear. "But no matter how smart an actor is, they still have to follow the script." Isabel was shouting in the headset. He used the prison guard's Bluetooth headset. "The signal in the detention room has been hijacked." I looked down at my watch. It was 3:50, 20 minutes until the live stream started. The cell is at the end of the corridor. The interval between security changes is only 90 seconds. Han Baker said they change shifts every hour with an error of no more than 3 minutes. I ran along the wall, and the moment the tactical pen opened the electronic lock, the alarm sounded. The moment the door opened, projections on the walls of the cell lit up. The picture shows me, my profile when I was cracking the Morse code in the monitoring room of the Vancouver Police Department. A close-up of my fingertips tapping on the keyboard when locating the IP in the warehouse. There is even a picture of me standing in front of my sister's tombstone, tearing up the photos of dark web scammers. "You think you're breaking the game?" Lucas's voice came from the speaker above his head. "You're just a character in my script." The floor suddenly shook. I rushed towards the man tied to the chair. He groaned in his throat and the wound on his forehead was still bleeding. The eye, codename Raven. He suddenly said, "They want to broadcast live." "Shut up." I ripped the zip ties from his wrists, his words drowned out by the sound of the floor cracking. The water gushing out from below flooded over the ankles, and the cold air seeped up through the trouser legs. This was a water-filled secret chamber. "Isabel, main power," I yelled. "Power distribution box in area B, 3rd row, 3rd switch." I dragged the man toward me and rushed out the door. The water behind us had already reached our knees. Lucas's laughter followed us. "According to the procedure, now is the climax scene of the hero saving the beauty. Han, cut off the signal transmitter. Location has been determined. In 3 seconds, the alarm stopped abruptly. The moment the emergency light went out, I reached for the power distribution box at the base of the wall and used a tactical pen to unlock the lock. The sound of metal colliding was particularly clear in the darkness. I pressed the third switch and the entire floor fell into complete darkness. "Catch me." The man's hand grabbed my wrist. We stumbled towards the stairs, the water still rising behind us. But without the lights, the cameras must be blind. When the exit security light came on, I looked back at the control room. In the green light of the backup power supply starting up, a laptop screen lit up. The countdown jumped from 000000000 and then refreshed to a blood-red next scene. Loading. Go. The man pulled me. I stared at the notebook, digging my nails into my palms. I'll come back and unplug its hard drive later. As the siren sounded from the ground, Han Baker called. "Blair is on the rooftop helipad, and Lucas's Bluetooth headset signal has disappeared." "It's not important." I wiped the water off my face. The next scene they want is the main character should be replaced. The man in my arms suddenly coughed, and blood foam splattered on my white coat. I looked down and saw a half piece of glass stuck in his chest. It was broken when he rushed out the door just now. "The code is in my necklace." He breathed weakly. "The new location of the rose garden." I touched the metal chain around his neck, and the moment I pulled it out, the green light of the backup power supply just happened to shine on it. It was a silver pocket watch, and the dial stopped at 712, the number that matched the 72 tattooed on Claire's wrist. There was a sound of something heavy falling to the ground. It was the special police rushing in. I stuffed the pocket watch into my trouser pocket and turned to look at the dark control room. The laptop screen was still on, and the words "next scene" flickered in the dark green, like an open eye. In the control room with power cut off, I quickly unplugged the hard drive of the backup laptop. I pulled off my rubber gloves, and the hard drive was still warm in my palm. The emergency light in the control room flashed twice, and the flashlights of the special police poured in from the corridor. I stuffed the hard drive into the anti-magnetic bag on the inner layer of my tactical vest, turned around and bumped into Mark's arms. "Hawk, the medical team is waiting. The hard drive is more important than me." I pushed his hand away. "Go check the surveillance on the top floor. Find the last location of Lucas's Bluetooth headset before it disappeared." Mark cursed, but still slapped the car keys into my hand. The temporary safe house was on the second underground floor of Chinatown, and the combination lock took 3 turns to open. I tore off my soaking wet white coat and connected the hard drive to the Raven's analysis station. As the blue light band flowed across the screen, cold sweat trickled down my spine from the back of my neck. This was the 3rd time I had seen this kind of code structure. Tiny prime number spaces between characters, like a worm-eaten Morse code. The phone vibrated on the desktop, and Isabel's video request popped up. Her face was stuck in the upper left corner of the screen, with an old scar under her left eye. I just hacked into the Vancouver Police Department's data stream. There's an inactivated subroutine on the hard drive you removed. Ghost code. I tapped. The Raven said it was waiting for a trigger. Not waiting. It's designed to automatically connect to a new node if police intervention is detected. Isabel's finger slid across the virtual screen and called up the case file from 5 years ago. In 2018, 3 middle school students drowned in Bucharest during a live broadcast. Their surveillance system also had this prime number interval. At that time, we tracked down a hacker named Oleg Kovalev, who encrypted an early version of the echo chamber. Oleg? I remembered Interpol's red notice. Isn't he dead? The dead one was a stand-in, a body that was cremated in Berlin. The sound of keyboard tapping could be heard in the video. Von Baker just sent a message. The FBI informant said he is now hiding in the electronic cemetery in District D of Brooklyn, an underground repair station that specializes in recycling scrapped servers. The Brooklyn sleet hit my face like little icy particles. I was wearing a faded work jacket and pushing a cart full of old hard drives. When the door curtain was opened, the smell of mold mixed with solder came out. There was a mountain of server wreckage piled up in the repair station. At the innermost workbench, a man in a leather jacket was using a heat gun to dismantle a graphics card. Collecting old equipment? He didn't even raise his head. Take the talking device. I slapped the USB drive next to his hand. There's a code in it. You'll know who I am after you read it. The hum of the heat gun stopped. Oleg raised his head. He had a patch on his left eye, and the vigilance in his right eye was like a poisoned needle. He plugged in the USB drive, and the moment the screen lit up, his breathing suddenly became heavy. The Black Crow protocol. He dug his fingers into the edge of the workbench. They still have this. Explain it.
This is the distributed control protocol of the echo chamber. He pulled off his eye mask, revealing a scar from his brow to his jaw. Each director is an independent node. By activating the protocol, they can remotely take over the live broadcast system, and even physically isolated devices can be hacked into. 5 years ago, I refused to use it to broadcast death live, so they burned down my laboratory in Kiev and killed my apprentice.
What is the weakness? Each time it is activated, a heartbeat packet will be sent, which lasts 4.3 seconds. He took out a crumpled piece of paper and drew a crooked data flow diagram. By tracing this packet backwards, we can locate the current master control IP, but there is only one chance. The packet will be automatically destroyed. I took out my phone. Raven is already running the ghost code in simulation. We need your algorithm patch. Oleg's fingers swiped across the screen of my phone quickly. Embed this code in, and their heartbeat packets will think they are from the same species. Bite. The Raven's notification sound exploded. I rushed to the analysis desk, and in the green data stream, a red dot as big as a needle tip flashed. 811 116th Street, Upper Manhattan. Oleg came over to take a look. That's the private center of Night Shadow data. The security system is the civilian version of Israel's Iron Dome. I texted the coordinates to Han, and as my finger hovered over the send button, the hair on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. Wait, Oleg grabbed my wrist. Are you sure you want to upload it now? We have to do it before they change the node. Then you'd better pray. Drop. The phone screen lit up, and a text message from an unknown number stabbed her eyes like an icicle. You're too slow, Eleanor. I looked up suddenly and the maintenance station's surveillance camera turned in a different direction. Oleg has already picked up the wrench on the table. Hurry up. They have located the signal. Sirens blared from the street. I clutched my phone and rushed into the rain, with the rain pouring in through my collar. The coordinates of the data center in Manhattan were still jumping on the screen. I touched the hard drive in the anti-magnetic bag. It was as heavy as a tombstone. The outer wall of the Yang data center emerged in my memory. A 3-meter-high alloy fence, infrared sensor lights flashing every 7 seconds, and cameras in the corners with no blind spots. I looked down at my watch and saw that the second hand of the mechanical watch was moving faster than my heartbeat. They said I was too slow. Then I'll run faster. I parked my electric bike in an alley 300 meters away from the Yang data center, and the wipers were still squeaking on the windshield. The hands of the mechanical watch just jumped to 21:03, and there were still 47 minutes before the heartbeat package was destroyed, as Oleg said. The hard drive in the anti-magnetic bag was poking at my ribs. I touched the work badge on my chest. A fake North American Electric Power Inspector certificate, with a little coffee stain on the edge. Isabel said that this small flaw makes it look the most real. The infrared lights of the alloy fence glowed coldly in the rain and fog, flashing once every 7 seconds. When I counted to the third flash, I lifted my legs and climbed over the drainage ditch on the right. The sound of rubber-soled work boots stepping on the slippery concrete floor was mostly swallowed by the sound of rain. Stop. The woman's voice was like an icicle piercing the back of my neck. I turned around and saw a woman in a navy blue uniform, with the words security supervisor
reflecting on her epaulettes. She put her right hand next to the holster on her waist and pointed at my ID card on my chest. With her left hand, electricity maintenance. No appointment today. I slammed the tool bag to the ground, and the metal wrench made a dull sound. The main transformer is overloaded, and the system automatically dispatched an order. My throat tightened, and I pretended to be impatient. Your operation and maintenance department just confirmed the authority half an hour ago. She didn't answer, but took out the intercom and pressed it twice. I stared at her. Adam's apple. A real security supervisor wouldn't swallow when checking ID. Erin Carter. There was an electric buzz over the intercom as she announced her name. Come with me to the visitor registration desk. My nails dug into my palms. Isabel's voice rang through the headset. We are hacking into their registration system. A reservation record for 1945 will be generated for you in 3 seconds. Wrong password. Irene paused on the tablet and looked up at me. What's the maintenance technician's name? Mike Rawlings. I blurt out. The pseudonym Isabel had made up 5 minutes ago. The tablet screen lit up. Irene's pupils shrank. She must have noticed that the time this record was generated was wrong, but she didn't expose it. She just waved her hand. Jamie, Carl, take this gentleman to the computer room in Area B. 2 security guards followed, one on the left and one on the right. I noticed that the frequency lights on their headsets were flashing. Not the common 450 MHz, but a shorter band. Isabel's breathing became heavier in the headset. It's a non-public frequency band, which meets the characteristics of an outer outpost of an echo chamber. The cold air from the computer room blew over with a metallic smell. When I bent down to check the power distribution cabinet, my eyes swept across the server rack in the corner. The switch on the top layer was labeled Black Crow GAN, which completely matched the nodes in the data flow diagram drawn by Oleg. Raven, start the monitoring module. I whispered, and my fingertips quickly inserted the micro USB flash drive into the switch interface. The red indicator light flashed twice and the data stream began to scroll. Heartbeat packet captured. Isabel's scream pierced her eardrums and hurt her. Protocol features matched. Live broadcast system is initializing and will be online within 24 hours. Alarms blasted. A blood red warning popped up on the switch screen. Unauthorized access. What is he doing? Jamie put his hand on my shoulder. I turned around suddenly, and the tool bag fell on his knees, and I took the opportunity to pull out the USB drive. Carl had already reached for the stun gun at his waist. Don't move. Irene's voice came from the door. She held the gun, the muzzle pointed steadily at my heart. Rain dripped down the brim of her hat, onto the barrel of the gun. I thought you guys would be here a little later. She raised her phone with her other hand, and on the screen was Claire's face, tied to a chair, with the 72 tattoo on her left wrist, glowing blue. Our starring actor is still waiting for you in Vancouver, Miss Hawke. The back of my neck was sweating.
Han's voice suddenly came from the headset. The NYPD Rapid Response Team has surrounded the building and is counting down to 10 seconds to break in.
Irene's pupils suddenly contracted. The moment she pulled the trigger, I dove for the nearest server rack. The bullet grazed his earlobe and shattered the surveillance screen on the wall. Bang! The sound of the door being smashed open drowned out the sound of gunfire. Han rushed in holding a riot shield, followed by figures in police uniforms. Irene turned around and tried to run, but was tripped by Jamie and fell to the ground. It turned out that these 2 security guards were plainclothes officers from the NYPD. I pressed on Irene's back and pulled a silver card from her pocket. The small words Black Crow Alpha are engraved on the back, and it feels like a knife blade. The main power switch is at the end of the corridor. Isabel shouted, "Turn it off. It will take 5 minutes for their backup system to start up." I rushed to the corridor and kicked open the door of the switch room. The moment the main switch was pulled, the entire building fell into darkness. When the emergency lights came on, Irene was already pinned to the ground, with Han's handcuffs flashing coldly on her wrists. I groped my way back to the computer room in the dark and inserted the Black Crow IFA card into the host terminal. The moment the screen lit up, a line of blood-red words pierced my eyes. Welcome to the director's chair. The second hand of the mechanical watch is still moving. I stared at the code jumping on the screen, and suddenly I heard Isabel screaming in the headset. The signal of the Vancouver warehouse is cut off. Claire's location has disappeared. The rain was still falling. I held the silver card tightly, and it was incredibly hot. When I pressed the Black Crow card into the card slot, there were still blood stains between my fingernails from where Irene had struggled. The host started up with a humming sound, and the blood-red font on the screen was like red ink dropped into clear water, slowly spreading out to form an operating interface. Authorization confirmed. A mechanical voice came out from the loudspeaker, making the back of my teeth ache. I typed quickly on the keyboard, and the log files came flooding in. The last command was sent at 3:17 in the morning, and the sender ID turned into a dazzling gold in the database. Marcus Blair. Isabel's voice exploded from the headset. Jonathan Blair's son. The old guy was shot dead by the FBI in Chicago 3 years ago. This kid inherited his dark web account, codenamed Silence of the Lambs. My finger rested on the delete key. Jonathan is the first-generation director of Hunter Theater. 5 years ago, he executed 3 human traffickers through live broadcast, and the audience's tips determined how they died. At that time, I had just been transferred to the Vancouver Police Department, and had seen his face in the file. He had a full beard, and a scar on his left eyebrow, like a piece of poisoned pig iron. What did he write in the diary? Han leaned over to look at the screen. I scrolled down and a window suddenly popped up on the last line of code. Chicago node initialization completed. Newborn Theater will be launched in 72 hours. Isabel gasped. He wants to copy the Hunter Theater, and on a larger scale. We've tracked him down. The keyboard clattered. Geneva, Switzerland. Anonymous server, hosting center. The coordinates have been sent to your phone. Han held my shoulders and said, I will apply for Interpol support. Please wait. Wait for them to go through the process. I pulled off the earphone cord. Claire's location has been gone for half an hour. Marcus won't give us 48 hours. The rain in Geneva is colder than in New York. I huddled in the shadows of the alley, staring at the metal back door of the hosting center. Isabel said Marcus would come to hand over the new server tonight, and he was in the habit of checking the hardware himself. Like his father, he was pathologically controlling. The watch hands showed 10:17. The iron door creaked open, and a man in a black hoodie walked out. He was similar in height and build to Jonathan, but his face was very young, no more than 25 years old. In his arms he held a silver box with a label on the corner that read, Black Crow. I reached for the defibrillator behind my waist. Miss Hawke. He suddenly looked up, a smile on his face. Have you been waiting for a long time? I froze in place. His eyes were a grey blue, exactly like Jonathan's eyes in the interrogation room photograph. What do you think you are stopping? He put the box on the ground and kicked it to my feet. We are just showing them the truth. Those hypocritical policemen, judges who take bribes, and human traffickers who sell children. The audience does not give tips for fun, but to vote. I held the stun gun tightly. So you want to live broadcast the killing? It was an execution. His voice suddenly rose. When my dad was live streaming, the audience let the pastor who sexually assaulted the girl be mauled to death by a wolfhound. Do you know what happened to the girl later? She was admitted to law school. He bent over to touch the box, and I pounced, but he was faster, his fingertips pressing the red button on the side of the box. Boom. The electromagnetic waves from the jammer came like an invisible fist, and the lights in the hosting center went out instantly. I grabbed his wrist in the dark, and he grabbed my neck with his backhand, his nails almost digging into my bones. You can't win. He panted in my ear. Echo chamber is not a tool, it's a virus. If you kill me, There will be silence of the lambs before. The sound of sirens came from a distance. He pushed me away and disappeared in the rain.
I got up and dragged the box to a bright spot. Inside was the core server, still connected to the data cable.
Raven, receive source code. I said to my watch. Deep analysis has been initiated. When the mechanical voice sounded, I saw a line of words pop up on the server screen. Protocol conversion completed. Tracking mode activated. As the return flight passed through the clouds, I stared at the Raven interface on my watch. A new message popped up in the blue data stream in a variation of the Morse code that Claire had taught me to recognize. Next node Tokyo. The stewardess came over to collect the meal trays, and I clasped my watch in my palm. The sunlight outside the window shines through the clouds, refracting tiny rays of light on the metal case. The signboards at Tokyo Haneda Airport should also have this kind of light. When the landing warning sounded, my finger lightly touched the confirmation button of the Raven. It's time to begin the next journey. Who am I? As I stuffed my passport into the inner pocket of my windbreaker, the air conditioning at Haneda Airport blew cold air onto the back of my neck. The watch vibrated twice, and Raven sent the location. The car of the Metropolitan Police Department's Cybercrime Countermeasures Division was parked at exit. Miss Hawk. The man in the navy blue suit opened the car door for me. The name tag on his nameplate read, Miura. He was the liaison officer sent by Kenichi Ito.
I got into the back seat, and my phone lit up. A message from Mark. Does Tokyo know you're looking into the echo chamber?
I quickly typed a reply. It's just an Interpol cooperation project. Miura looked at me through the rearview mirror. Section Chief Ito is waiting for you. As the elevator in the Metropolitan Police Department building ascended, I touched the metal button on the side of my watch. The Raven's warm-up cue danced on the retinal projection, a green spot of light, like a watchful eye. We arrived at the 7th floor. The door of the office at the end of the corridor was open. A man was standing in front of the window with his back to me. The sleeves of his black shirt were rolled up to his forearm. There was an old scar on the back of his neck, as if he had been cut by some sharp weapon.
Miss Hawk,
He turned around, his voice like sandpaper on metal. I'm Kenichi Ito. I handed over my ID, and he glanced at it and put it back on the table. We have noticed signs that the Black Crow Protocol is active in Japan. He tapped the computer screen with his knuckles, and a string of garbled characters kept flashing on it. Where do you want to start? Server cluster log. I pushed the USB drive over. The traffic tracking in Vancouver shows that, of the 23 layers of encrypted jumps in the Hunter Theater live broadcast, 7 layers passed through the Tokyo node.
He didn't connect the USB drive, but directly opened the drawer and took out an IC card. Data room on the 7th floor. The authority has been opened.
The air conditioning in the data room is colder than that in the airport. I sat in the swivel chair, my fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard, and Raven synchronously connected to the Metropolitan Police Department's firewall. 3 seconds later, a red warning exploded on the retinal projection. Disguised agent detected. I paused and looked up at the security camera. It stood at the door at some point, holding a mug in his hand. 3 years ago, a data center in Shinjuku was closed down due to a hacker attack. He took a sip of tea. It has not been used since then, but the electricity bill is still being generated. I pulled up a traffic graph for the Tokyo Anonymous server cluster. Blue dots of light flowed on the screen like stars, and suddenly an area turned dark red. Shinjuku District, with coordinates of 35.6913 north latitude. Raven, locate the physical address of this IP segment, I said softly. The watch vibrated and a map popped up on the projection. An abandoned data center, formerly owned by Optoelectronics Co. Limited, which was investigated in 2020 for illegally storing user data. Do you need an on-site inspection? Ito leaned against the door frame. I can mobilize the police officers in the area. It will alert the enemy. I shook my head. Contact technical support first. The University of Tokyo Cybersecurity Research Center is in Miguro Ward. Manami Sato's office is filled with paper documents. She pushed up her gold-rimmed glasses. On the computer screen was a string of zeros and ones. I saw this at the Deep Web seminar 3 years ago. She used a laser pointer to point to a certain section. Here, the memory management module overlaps 90% with my open source framework Prism. Has the author contacted you? No. She clicked the mouse, and the code suddenly expanded into a complex tree diagram. But last week someone used the Prism vulnerability to attack my test server. She looked up at me. The attack IP points to Shinjuku. I took out my phone and called up the log fragments left over from Silence of the Lambs 2. The Tokyo node is not independent. Raven's analysis results popped up. On the East Asian map, the light spots of Seoul, Manila, and Sydney are all connected to Tokyo. It is the Asian hub of the echo chamber. Sato's fingers paused on the keyboard. So a live broadcast. It will affect signal jumps in 5 areas at the same time. I finished her words. They are weaving a network. It was already dark when we returned to the Metropolitan Police Department. I was redeploying Raven's Tokyo analysis module in the data room when a dialog box suddenly popped up on the screen. There was no title, just one line of text. You are not the first one to come here. Sender ID. Echo. I straightened up suddenly. Echo 07 is an informant in the New York theater case. He disappeared 3 months ago while tracking the Black Crow protocol. Mark said at the time that he might have defected, but now the dialog box refreshed and a blurry photo popped up. The pixels looked like water-soaked newspapers, and the outline of Tokyo Tower could barely be made out. A man in a black hoodie stood on the observation deck, his back to the camera, holding something in his right hand. After zooming in, a string of red numbers flashed in the background. Raven. Enhance the image quality. I pressed the watch. The noise faded a little, revealing half of a silver box at the man's feet, which looked very similar to the Black Crow B in Vancouver. His left wrist. I leaned closer to the screen. There was a patch of lighter skin, like a tattoo that had just been removed. Bite. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Mark. I found the last call record of Echo 07. It was located near Tokyo Tower. I looked up and out the window. In the night, the red lights of Tokyo Tower are flashing like an unblinking eye. The Raven suddenly chirped, and the map on the projection automatically zoomed in and stopped on the west side of Tokyo Tower. There was a row of old buildings, one of which had a faded sign hanging on it. Hoshino Photography Studio. The keyboard made a slight click under my hands. I pulled up the studio's registration information and found that the legal representative's name was coded. However, in the business license photo, there were several silver equipment boxes piled in the corner, overlapping with the outlines of the boxes in the photo. The wind outside the window lifted the curtains and rustled the documents on the table. I reached out and pressed the photo. The numbers 71, 59, 58 were still jumping like a thorn piercing my skin. The next node has just begun. I pushed my cap down to my brow bone, held the forged equipment rental form in my left hand, and put my right hand in the pocket of my windbreaker. The pocket contained a miniature thermal imager. There was a thin layer of dust on the glass door of Hoshino Photography Studio, and it made a creaking sound when pushed open. The girl at the front desk was smiling at her phone. She looked up and saw me, her eyelashes fluttering. Equipment rental, the 4K fill light that Mr. Matsumoto has reserved. I slapped the order on the counter and rubbed my fingernail across the forged electronic signature area. Raven had already thoroughly analyzed Matsumoto Ryuichi's signature sample. The little sister glanced at the list and her fingers that were tapping the keyboard suddenly stopped. Mr. Matsumoto is not in the studio today. Then you have to give it to me. I pulled my collar, revealing the Tokyo Equipment Rental work badge hanging around my neck. The system shows that my performance will be deducted for overtime. Basement key. She hesitated for 2 seconds, then took out a bunch of copper keys from the drawer. The key at the bottom was rusty. When I took it, I deliberately let my work badge slip, and the metal buckle hit the counter with a crisp sound. In the instant her attention was diverted, the thermal imager had already scanned the back of her neck. No implanted tracking chip. Safe. When the iron door of the basement closed behind me, I heard the laughter of the girl at the front desk watching short videos above my head. The phone vibrated against my thigh, and Raven sent a reminder. Matsumoto Ryuichi has no mobile signal in the past 3 hours, and is most likely not present. The emergency light on the wall is voice-controlled. I stomped my feet. In the dim light, 20 servers were lined up in 2 rows, and the hum of the fans sounded like a dormant swarm of bees.
There were 3 silver equipment boxes piled in the corner, exactly like the ones in the photo.
I squatted down and ran my fingertips over the box number, BC-07. The tail number of Vancouver's Black Crow brother his. Click. I looked up suddenly. There was a slight noise coming from the ventilation duct, like a mouse. I took out the micro-monitoring module and pressed it on the side of the server host, and the green progress bar of Raven began to scroll. As I turned around, I caught a glimpse of a piece of sticky note taped to the corner of the wall. It had Japanese handwriting inked on it. Act 7. Audience, please be prepared to enter. The phone got hot in my pocket, and the Raven's notification tone was short. Test stream intercepted. I quickly called up the projection. The picture was distorted for 2 seconds, and then it became clear that it was an enclosed glass cabin. The woman in the white dress pressed herself against the glass, leaving cracks with her fingernails. The countdown behind her was ticking. The camera zooms in and reveals a red knob in the lower right corner of the cabin, marked with 02%. It's exactly the same as Claire's cell in the Vancouver warehouse. Even the curvature of the vents is exactly the same. Fuck, I cursed under my breath, digging my fingers into my palms. Raven began to pass the data stream, and the moment the source address popped up, my blood froze. The IP segment belonged to the dark web node during the debut of Hunter Theater. Byte. The phone vibrated as a new message popped up from Echo 07. I'm waiting for you. If you want to know how they choose actors, come to Ikebukuro. The address screenshot was the back alley of Ikebukuro West Exit Park, marked Abandoned Internet Cafe. The server's fan suddenly spun louder, and I stared at the desperate face of the woman on the screen, her lips saying, "Save me." I heard the footsteps of the girl at the front desk coming from the stairs. I pulled off the monitoring module and stuffed it under my tongue. I took 3 photos of the equipment box number with my mobile phone. When I turned around, I knocked over a cardboard box in the corner. A stack of photos was scattered on the ground. The top photo is of Claire, a work photo taken 5 years ago when she was investigating the rose garden. The 72 tattoo on her left wrist is clearly visible. Just put the equipment here. The voice of the girl at the front desk exploded above my head. I bent over to pick up the photo, and my fingertips touched a yellowed newspaper clipping. The front page headline read, "Wife of Rose Garden Principal Criminal Wyland commits suicide in prison, leaving her orphan with a mystery." I stuffed all the photos into the inner pocket of my windbreaker and rushed upstairs. My little sister was holding up her phone to take pictures of my back. I nodded at her. "Thank you." She didn't say anything, but her eyes were like glue stuck to my back. The night breeze in Ikebukuro was filled with the smell of instant noodles, and the only thing left on the neon sign of the abandoned internet cafe was the word net. When I pushed open the door, the dust made me cough. The innermost booth had a cell phone screen on, and the light revealed the outline of a man. A high nose bridge and an old scar on his left eyebrow. He was the FBI undercover doctor who I dragged to avoid the killer in a New York subway station 3 months ago. "You're not dead," I said. He didn't respond, but tapped the table with his knuckles. The actors they chose all have something in common. What? Guilt. He looked up, his eyes as if icy. Claire feels guilty for the death of her informant, and you feel guilty for your sister's suicide. They just rub salt into wounds, and the more pain someone feels, the more the audience likes to watch. I took a half step back, my lower back against the sticky back of the chair. So you disappeared. They want me to be the director. He tugged at his collar, his Adam's apple moving, to teach them how to make the actors collapse more beautifully. But I have a trick up my sleeve. He took out a micro memory from his pocket and threw it over with a flash of silver light. This is what they really want you to see, etc. He had stood up and his figure melted into the darkness. I heard sirens outside the internet cafe. I clenched the memory stick and my fingertips touched the letters engraved on it. When I returned to the Metropolitan Police Department's Countermeasures Division, the air conditioning made the back of my neck feel cold. I closed the door, locked it, and inserted the memory stick into the computer. The moment the screen lit up, the Raven issued a sharp alarm and a stream of data poured down like a rainstorm. I held my aching temple and stared at the code that kept refreshing on the screen. That string of numbers was exactly the same as the countdown in the glass cabin. I was digging my nails into my palms when the alarm calls of ravens pierced my eardrums. The data stream in the memory suddenly solidified into pieces. The first picture was a map of Asia, with Tokyo, Seoul, and Bangkok circled in red. The title Black Crow Agreement Asia Deployment hurt my eyes. The second one is the list. Name, position, bank account number. The last line made my fingers cramp. Yuki Kobayashi, Legal Liaison Officer of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. When the door broke open, I nearly dropped my keyboard. Itakinichi's tie was crooked on his collarbone, and his forehead was stained with broken hair. What did you find out? I turned the screen towards him. His Adam's apple moved, and he pressed his knuckles against the edge of the table. Impossible. She was helping us coordinate cross-border data last week. Check her communication records for the past 2 weeks. I pressed the tracking button on the Raven. Encrypted hotspot. Half an hour later, AT's cell phone vibrated the desk. He glanced at the screen, and when he looked up, his eyes were bloodshot. Ikebukuro, Shinjuku. 7 encryption nodes. She goes there at 2 in the morning every day. Assault on Matsumoto. I pulled off my headphones. Server farmers can't just fix machines. Matsumoto's studio is in an old warehouse in Shinagawa. When we kicked the door open, he was adding sugar to his coffee. Seeing the police badge, he smiled and said, "I told you this day would come." Backstage password. Eto took out handcuffs. Matsumoto pointed at the surveillance screen with his finger stained with sugar residue. "Is this the director you want?" The screen switched to real-time surveillance of the lobby of the Metropolitan Police Department. A woman in a beige suit was walking by with documents in her arms. Yuki Kobayashi. She is the player. Matsumoto licked the corner of his mouth. Me? I'm just a machine repairman. Alarms blasted from the phone. It was a link sent by Mark from the task force titled Tokyo Node, Judgment Night. I clicked on it and saw a white-walled room. A girl in a reporter's uniform was tied to an iron chair. There was a fresh scar on her left wrist. Exactly the same location as Claire's 72 tattoo. When the judge's voice sounded, my blood ran cold. It was Yuki Kobayashi, her sweet voice wrapped in ice. "You covered up the truth. Now it's your turn to be judged." The girl struggled to raise her head, her voice trembling with tears. "I didn't. They forced me to." Ding. A reward notification popped up on the screen, and the silence of the Lamb's account received. Shaolin's voice suddenly changed, like a distorted tape. The audience said, "Cut it." I threw my phone at the back of Matsumoto's chair. Ito put his hand on my shoulder. "Go after the signal source." The Raven's positioning cursor jumped in the Metropolitan Police Department building. When I rushed in clutching my tactical flashlight, the elevator displayed 12th floor, archives room. The door was ajar. The moment I kicked it open, Xiaolin was facing away from me, with his fingertips hovering above the keyboard. She turned her face, her hair hanging down to her collarbone, and her smile was like freshly brewed tea. "Welcome to Act 7, Eleanor. You are finally here." "Why?" My voice was shaking. She pointed to the screen, which showed Claire being imprisoned. The countdown jumps to 48:03:22. "Because you always think you can save everyone." "What about you?" I reached for the holster at my waist.
Me?
She pressed the last button, and the lights in the entire building went out. The emergency light was off. Only the screen was glowing blue, with a line of bloody words on it. "In this case, you are the defendant." In the darkness, I felt for the switch of the tactical flashlight. Just as she was about to press down, she heard Xiaolin's breathing beside her ear. "Don't be anxious, Eleanor. The audience has just entered." In the darkness, with trembling fingertips, I touched the switch of the tactical flashlight. With a click, cold white light split the darkness. Kobayashi Yuki was sitting in front of a portable terminal, against the wall. The ends of her hair were stained with the afterglow of the emergency light before it went out. The blue light of the screen reflected her face. In the picture, the girl was tied to an iron chair, and a knife was pressed against her left wrist. The subtitle scrolled, "Defendant Eleanor Hawke."
You're not a judge.
My voice hit the wall. "You're an actor." She smiled, her fingertips tapping on the keyboard in a regular pattern. "Judge? No, I'm a megaphone." The screen switched. Claire's live broadcast was superimposed on the reporter girl, and the countdown jumped to 47:58:11. The purpose of the echo chamber is to let those who claim to be righteous also have a taste of being judged. She pulled out a yellow document. My pupils contracted. It was my sister's death record at St. Mary's Hospital 5 years ago. The signature column on the last page of the medical record was circled in red pen, and it was my name. "Do you think she was forced to death by dark web fraud?" Xiaolin scratched the paper with his fingernails. "In fact, she was saved by you." Blood rushed to the top of the head. Veins popped out of my hand as I clenched the flashlight. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that her right little finger always touched the keys first when she typed. Exactly the same operating habits as the director I had seen in the Matsumoto server farm, monitoring. "You're lying." I took a half step forward, and the light of my tactical flashlight swept across her wrist. "Just like you forged your identity as a legal officer of the Metropolitan Police Department. Does it matter whether you believe it or not?" Her finger hovered above the confirm button. "What matters is that the audience wants to see you break down." I stared at the reporter's trembling eyelashes on the screen. The scar on her left wrist was still bleeding, and it was in the exact same spot as Claire's tattoo. The sound of my heartbeat drowned out the tinnitus in my ears. I suddenly bent down, pretended to pick up something. The flashlight swept across the terminal power cord. The black plug, hidden in the corner of the table. "The last person your sister called wasn't a scammer." Xiaolin's voice was as thin as a needle. "It was you." I stood up suddenly and rushed to the corner of the table. The moment her fingertips touched the plug, she screamed and grabbed my wrist, but I had already calculated the angle. The moment the plug was pulled out, the entire terminal screen went black, and the live broadcast screen shattered into snowflakes. 3 minutes, I yelled into the intercom. "Ito, locate the source of the restart signal." There were hurried footsteps in the darkness. I took out the portable version of Raven and plugged it into the interface before the terminal restarted. When the system prompt sounded, sweat from his forehead dripped into his collar. Raven was cracking the encryption protocol set by Xiaolin, and the green progress bar was moving faster than his heartbeat. Found the background log. I quickly scanned the screen. Tokyo node, target list. The next line took my breath away. Sato Manami's name is followed by a red note. Academic contact records can be forged, suitable as a sample of pseudo-justice. The image of her debugging equipment in the laboratory popped out in the photo. and the emblem of the University of Tokyo on the background wall hurt her eyes. Eleanor. Ita's voice exploded from the intercom. The building structure shows that there is an unregistered basement under the archive room, and thermal imaging shows 7 figures. I pulled down the Raven, and the terminal started to automatically reboot. Shaolin slumped on the ground, staring at the black screen and laughing. You think you win by cutting off the live broadcast? The real trial has just begun. The phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out, and the screen lit up. The sender showed Echo 07, and there was only one line of text. Be careful, your ally is not clean. There was the sound of police boots in the corridor. Itu's shadow appeared at the door, and the light of the tactical flashlight swept across my tense face. We found the entrance to the basement. Need support? I stared at the warning on my phone screen, and my Adam's apple moved. Shaolin was still laughing, and his laughter mixed with the sound of sirens in the distance, like a thin wire wrapped around his spine. Let's go. I put my phone in my trouser pocket. Let's deal with the basement first. But Echo Z7's message burned into his retinas. The mysterious account that always provided clues at critical junctures suddenly reminded me that there was something wrong with my ally. Was it Mark? Is it Sato? Still, Eleanor? Ito pushed me. I took a deep breath and followed him down the hallway. Shaolin's whisper came from behind, crushed by the footsteps. When you look back, beneath the mask of justice, everyone is an audience. My phone continued to vibrate in my pocket. This time it was the sound of an unread message. I didn't dare to take it out. My thigh was numb from the vibration of my cell phone in my trouser pocket. As I followed it down the stairs, my fingertips unconsciously stroked the seam of my trousers. The warning from Echo 07 was like a thin needle, piercing through my skin and into my bones. Minami Sato. 3 days ago in the police station conference room, when she pushed up her glasses and said, "The no-jump patterns on the dark web may be related to the group psychology model," I was staring at the Tokyo University emblem on her white coat. Earlier, at 3 o'clock in the morning last Tuesday, I suddenly received a supplementary explanation on the encryption protocol vulnerability from her in my mailbox, and at that time I had just discovered the new domain name of Hunter Theater on the dark web forum. The entrance to the basement is behind the filing cabinet. Ito's voice brought me back to reality. He squatted down and used a tactical knife to pry open the gap in the floor. The smell of mold mixed with the smell of damp concrete came up. I took out the Raven and quickly entered the instructions on the phone screen. Deal with the basement first, then deal with Sato. But Shaolin's laughter is still in my ears. When she said the real trial has just begun, the light dancing in her pupils reminded me of those paying viewers in the dark web live broadcast room, who were also excited when they clicked the hint button. The moment the iron door of the basement was pried open, 7 figures huddled together. 3 Asian men wearing hoods and 4 girls huddled in the corner. The youngest was about 14 or 15 years old, and had a fresh knife wound on her wrist. When I squatted down, she suddenly grabbed my sleeve and dug her nails into my skin. "Sister," they said. They said they would take us to see the mirror speaker. Mirror speaker. The blood roared in his temples. I looked up suddenly. Ito was untying the hostages. His voice seemed to come from far away. "Hawk, you look bad." I fished out my cell phone and pulled up my sister's old computer records. On that rainy night 3 years ago, the last keyword she searched for was mirror language. There was still a half-finished document in the browser history. A mysterious account appeared on the dark web forum, claiming to be able to weave reality with language, which may involve was covered by a string of garbled codes. It was the virus implanted in her by the fraud group. Interrogation records. Ita thrust the tablet computer over. Kobayashi confessed. She was just an executor. The mastermind behind the scenes was codenamed Mirror Talker. I squeezed the tablet until my knuckles turned white. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when we returned to the police station. I avoided everyone, and went into the technical room. The blue light of Raven reflected on my face. I entered Sato Manami's name, and her academic file immediately popped up on the system. The draft of a paper from 3 years ago. Application of moral ambiguity communication model in online groups, with keywords information cocoon and behavior guidance algorithm. I held my breath when the beep signaling the start of the comparison sounded. 37%. A red warning suddenly popped up on the screen. 87.6% similarity to the core algorithm of the Black Crow protocol. The Black Crow protocol is the underlying code used by the echo chamber criminal network to manipulate dark web public opinion. I have seen this code in the Bangkok branch server that was destroyed last year. The keyboard made a noise when I smashed it. Sato said last week that she had never come into contact with the Black Crow protocol, but in her draft paper, every parameter is laying the foundation for group control. Do you need help? I turned around suddenly. Sato stood at the door, his white coat draped over his arm, water dripping from the ends of his hair, as if he had just taken a shower. Her eyes swept across the screen, stopping at the number 87.6%, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. So you are checking this? I clenched the Raven tightly, digging my nails into my palms. Explain. Explain what? She walked over and ran her fingertips over the title of the paper on my screen. Moral Ambiguity Communication Model, or Black Crow Protocol. Her voice suddenly softened. Eleanor, you should check my lab permission records. Before I could react, she turned and left. The door of the technical room closed behind her. I stared at the water stains she left behind, and suddenly remembered the laboratory system of the University of Tokyo. I should be able to access it with Interpol's Cooperation Authority. Half an hour later, I was sitting in the information center of the University of Tokyo. My hand was unusually steady as I showed my ID. The administrator tapped on the keyboard. Login records for the past month? From 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. A total of 7 times. He called up the IP tracking results. Location: Zug, Switzerland. Canton of Zug. The underground clinic of Marcus Blair, the black-hearted doctor who provided organ transplants to the Rose Garden, is hidden there. I walked towards the hotel holding the printed records. It started to rain, and the ribs of the umbrella hit my shoulders painfully. The moment I pushed open the door of the hotel room, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The door was ajar. The ceiling light was not on. Only the bedside lamp was on. There was an A4 paper on the table, with printed words still smelling of ink. If you already doubt me, then you are not far from the truth. The signature was Sato's electronic signature, the kind of cursive English that she always used. I rolled over to my back. A string of gibberish crawled all over the page, like Morse code blown away by the wind. As the Raven's scanning frame lit up, I heard my own heartbeat drowning out the sound of the rain. Analysis completed. A set of coordinates popped up on the screen. Yokohama port. The following line reads, "Trial is not the end, it is the beginning. The rain is getting heavier." I folded the note into small pieces and stuffed them into my underwear pocket. The neon lights outside the window became blurry spots in the rain. The coordinates of Yokohama port flashed on the mobile phone map like a dark red mole. Tomorrow, I should go there and take a look. But before that, I took out my phone and sent a message to Echo 07. Mirror talker, check. The moment the send button was pressed, the bedside lamp suddenly went out. In the darkness I heard footsteps coming from the corridor. Very slow, as if someone was sticking to my door, counting the rhythm of my heartbeat. I waited in the rain for half an hour. The footsteps in the hotel corridor no longer approached, but as I went downstairs, a figure flashed in the elevator mirror. The man was wearing a black raincoat, and his hat brim was pulled down low. I held the wolf pen tightly in my pocket until I walked out of the hotel door, and the figure did not follow me. Yokohama Port Pier 23 was not closed until 3 in the morning. I put the umbrella into the plastic bag
The rain dripped down the brim of my hat to the tips of my shoes, and the coolness seeped into my socks. The navigation showed that the target location was behind an abandoned dock. The iron fence was wrapped with rusty barbed wire, and there was fresh green paint on the gaps, the same color as Sato's white coat in the laboratory. The red light of the Raven swept across the door lock. When the metal lock cylinder made a click, the back of my neck started to feel hot again. When I was hunting down dark web scammers 5 years ago, this burning feeling always appeared before danger approached. Inside the door was a 3-story concrete building with its exterior walls covered with ivy. The first floor lobby was covered in half an inch of dust, but there were 2 fresh lines of shoe prints, size 40, rubber-soled, exactly the same as the lab shoes Sato was wearing today. The hymn of service came from the second floor. I moved up along the wall, and the surveillance camera at the corner of the stairs suddenly lit up, and a red dot swept across my face. Raven popped up a warning. Local network activated, IP pointing to inside the building. The door of the central control room was ajar. The moment I opened the door, the cold air, mixed with the smell of disinfectant, hit me in the face. 30 old servers were arranged in a semicircle, with green indicator lights like a group of eyes. Sitting on the swivel chair in the middle, Sato had his back to me, with engine oil stained on the cuffs of his white coat. "You're 10 minutes late." She didn't look back. "The lock control system has been upgraded. Your Raven should have taken 3 more minutes to crack it." I reached for the pistol at my waist, but instead I touched the chip in my underwear pocket. The note she left was still there. "How did you know I would come?" "Because your sister's face always appears in the corner of the screen when you are investigating a case." She turned her chair, holding the USB drive in her hand. Like now. The projection on the wall suddenly lit up. It was a blurry old video. 16-year-old Emily was sitting on the bay window in her bedroom, her phone shaking as she held it, her tear-stained face all over the camera. "Please don't forward it. That loan advertisement is fake," she said in a crying voice. "I really can't pay it back." My throat tightened. I have watched this video no less than 100 times. 6 years ago, Emily was threatened with a photoshopped nude photo by a dark web fraud gang. She posted a request for help on a social platform, but the marketing account took her out of context and edited it into a female college student selling misery to gain traffic. 3 days later, she jumped from the roof of her apartment. "Your sister's death was the first experiment of the echo chamber." Seto inserted the USB into the host. The Mirror Whisperer project was originally intended to study how to guide the audience to participate in crimes. They let marketing accounts lead the trend, let netizens call her a drama queen, and make her feel that the whole world is laughing at her. She tapped the server with her fingers. Later, this model was weaponized and used in the Hunter Theater live broadcast. The audience gave rewards not to see her die, but to see how they can become a judge. I held the Raven tightly, and the time on the screen jumped to 4:17 in the morning. "So you approached me. I'm looking for someone who can destroy this system." She took out a silver chip from her white coat. "This is the core data of Mirror Speaker. Director list, funding chain, how they select actors, including your sister's case, who bribed the marketing account, and who asked the internet police to delay the account ban." My nails dug into my flesh as the chip touched my palm. "Why give it to me now?" "Because in 30 seconds, the server here will be formatted." She pressed the last key on the keyboard, and the buzzing sound of the server suddenly became louder. "And you will become the new Mirror Speaker." The alarm sounded. I rushed to the door, then turned back sharply. "What about you?" "I was originally their experimental data." She smiled, with tears in the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. "But at least I taught you how to see through their scripts." As I ran out of the building, the rain stopped. The chip was burning in my pocket, so I rushed to my hotel room and plugged it into my laptop. The moment the loading bar jumped to 99%, the screen went black. When it came back on, it showed a blurry surveillance video.
15-year-old Lucas Wyland, standing in the corner of a dimly lit conference room, wearing an ill-fitting black suit. In front of him sat a man, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, tapping his fingers on the table. "Welcome to join the founding group of Echo Chamber." The computer suddenly crashed. I slammed the keyboard, and a line of words flashed across the screen. "The next script will feature you as the protagonist." The sky outside the window was turning pale. I pulled out my phone, and the address book stopped at the name Mark. But I didn't press the dial button, because I heard there was a slight turning sound from the door handle. I stared at the black screen of my laptop, cracking my knuckles until they turned white. The chip was heating up in the USB port. The surveillance footage just now was like a steel needle piercing my retina. 15-year-old Lucas was huddled in the corner of the conference room, his black suit so big that it almost covered his knees, and the man with gold-rimmed glasses had a voice like sandpaper rubbing against the eardrums. "What we need to do is not to punish criminals, but to turn justice into a performance." That was the birthplace of the Echo Chamber. Sato's voice came from behind. I turned my head suddenly, and I didn't know when she was standing behind me. Her white coat was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Where did this video come from? I pulled over a chair and sat down, tapping quickly on the keyboard, trying to restore the file. "My father's research." She pulled over another chair, and the metal legs scraped across the floor with a harsh sound. "He was an early member of the Mirror Talkers. Later, he discovered that they were conducting experiments on living people, so he fled with the data." The man who was speaking, her Adam's apple moved. Carl Lehman, a Swiss psychologist and the real designer of the Echo Chamber. My fingers paused. "Where is he now?" "Tokyo." The phone vibrated in my palm. I swiped the screen and saw a message from E2. "The target has been located. Arrival records at Tokyo's Narita Airport," popped up on the computer screen. Carl Lehman, who holds a Swiss passport, entered the country 3 days ago in the name of International Ethics Seminar, and stayed at the Hoshino Hotel in Ginza. His registered position was Cognitive Behavioral Research Consultant. "Do you need support?" Sato touched my arm. I tucked the tiny listening device into my sleeve. "No thanks." The mirror in the elevator of the Hoshino Hotel showed me. My ponytail was tied tightly, my shirt was tucked into my trousers, and my name tag read, "Seminar, Academic Assistant." This was a fake identity that Mark's old partner found in the police database, and had just sent to the front desk via email 5 minutes ago. "The suite is on the 22nd floor." I bent down to tie my shoe and stuck the pea-sized listening device into the crack of the door frame. The moment the green light on the device flashed, vague conversations were heard in the room. "Lucas is too emotional." A deep male voice came, like sandpaper soaked in water. "We have to regain control of the rhythm." Another voice was lighter, and had an electronic inflection. "Eleanor Hawke has come too close to the truth. It's time for her to see the real script." I clutched the tiny walkie-talkie on my sleeve. Mark's voice exploded in his ears. "Hawke, support will arrive in 10 minutes. No more waiting." I cut off the communication, and called up the invasion interface of Raven. The code of the hotel access control system flowed before my eyes, and 3 seconds later, with a beep, the door opened. There were no lights on in the suite. The moonlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the whiskey glass on the coffee table, with water droplets condensing on the wall of the glass. There was an open laptop on the desk against the wall, and the blue light from the screen was so bright that it was impossible to open your eyes. The countdown numbers are ticking. "Welcome to the founding group." A synthesized voice floated out from the computer. "Are you ready to be an actor?" I rushed over and pressed the power button, but the screen suddenly went black and then lit up again. A satellite map filled the entire screen, with red coordinates flashing in Yokohama Port. That was the abandoned scientific research facility that Sato took me to last week. The outer walls were covered with ivy, and the iron door was hung with a rusty lock. The countdown jumped to 0 with a ding sound. The computer shut down automatically. I unplugged the power cord from my computer and stuffed it into my bag, knocking over the coffee table as I turned around. The whiskey glass rolled onto the carpet, leaving a dark stain with a silver chip buried in it, exactly the same one Sato had given me. There were footsteps in the corridor. I grabbed my computer and rushed out the door. The elevator indicated that the 22nd floor was going up. The phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from Sato. The core server of Miratalka is located on the 3rd underground floor of the Yokohama facility. I turned on the screen, and the red coordinates were still flashing. It started raining again. I rushed into the parking lot, the windshield wipers swaying frantically, the electronic sound of the car navigation system drowning out my heartbeat. Destination: abandoned scientific research facility at Yokohama Port. Remaining distance 27 kilometers. The laptop on the passenger seat suddenly beeped. I glanced at it, and the screen lit up automatically. When the countdown reached 0, a line of blood-red words popped up. Welcome to the real theater actor. The wipers left 2 watermarks on the glass. As if someone was laughing, rain pounded on the roof of the car. The tires rolled over the puddles, and the electronic voice of the car's navigation system was torn into pieces by the sound of rain. Arrived at destination, I stepped on the brakes, and the engine let out an ear-piercing scream. When I opened the car door, the rain curtain came down on my head, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The abandoned scientific research facility covered with ivy was right in front of me. The iron door was half open, and the rusty lock lay in the mud, as if it had been deliberately pried open by someone. The laptop on the passenger seat suddenly became hot. I grabbed it and rushed into the facility, the water on the concrete floor overflowing the toes of my shoes. The steps on the 3rd underground floor glowed with a cold light, and every step felt like stepping on ice. The last door had a combination lock, and the metal panel was covered with cobwebs. I called up the Raven interface. The green progress bar jumped 3 times, and the lock tongue popped out with a click. The musty smell comes out first. When I opened the door, the entire wall of screens was flashing, and through the snowflakes I could vaguely see the neon lights of New York's Times Square, the outline of London's Tower Bridge, and the lights of Singapore's Marina Bay. It was the live signal source, and it was loading. Hawk. Sato's voice seeped out from the shadows. She stood in front of the screen on the far left, her white shirt sticking to her back, her hair dripping with water, and her eyes were abnormally bright, like the tip of a poisoned knife. I took a half step back and leaned my lower back against the operating table. Are you following me? I'll wait for you. She touched the console, her fingertips swiping across the coordinates jumping on the screen. This is the core server of Mirror Whisperer. Do you think I betrayed you? No, I'm creating chaos. The real manipulators are hiding in the calm, and they will only show their hands when the table is overturned. Overturn. I stared at her finger on the start button. Or rebuild. The screen suddenly went black. A line of white words carved into the retina like a knife. Welcome back to the founding team. Seto pressed the confirm button. Administrative privileges have been transferred. She turned to look at me, rain dripping down her chin onto the operating table. Now you know. I never betrayed. I just needed someone who could break the rules. The phone vibrated in my pocket. Ito's message popped up. The words were blood red. Mitsumoto confessed. Carl deployed backup servers around the world through him, and is now synchronously launching the 7th version of the Black Crow protocol. I lunged at the keyboard, and the Raven interface exploded in the retinal projection. The red warning licked my pupils like a tongue of fire. Permission locked. Verification by the founding group is required. Only the founding team can terminate the agreement. Sato took out a chip from his pocket, which was exactly the same as the one in the hotel carpet. This is what your sister left behind. My throat tightened. The chip glowed coldly in the rain, with tiny letters engraved on the edge. LL, the abbreviation of Shaolin's name. She gave me this chip a week before she died. Sato's voice was as light as a sigh. She said that if the mirror whisperer goes astray one day, the person holding it must bring it back to its origin. I took the chip. My fingers were shaking. The moment I inserted it into the terminal, the screens on the entire wall suddenly lit up. It's a photo. Sherilyn and I sat in the first row of the university auditorium. She was wearing a white dress, and her hair was bathed in the warm light of the auditorium. The background poster was enlarged to fill the screen with the title, Internet Ethics and Technological Boundaries, When Code Has the Power of Judgment. Xiaolin's smile is very clear, just like it was 10 years ago. At that time, she had just received the admission letter from the computer science department, and her eyes were full of light. The terminal beeps. Black data streams seeped out from the edges of the photo and drilled into the cracks of the screen, like countless thin snakes. The raven vibrated in his consciousness. Hidden code detected. Do you want to analyze it? I stared at the school badge that Xiaolin wore on her collar in the photo. The badge with a blue background and silver edges was exactly the same shape as the chip I was holding in my hand. The rain was still falling, pouring in through the ventilation ducts, dripping onto the terminal, blurring Xiaolin's face in the photo. The hissing sound of the data stream became louder and louder, like someone grinding their teeth in the dark. I gritted my teeth at the word yes, projected on my retina. Analysis, I said to Raven. The data flow suddenly surged. The school emblem of Xiaolin in the photo began to distort, and the metallic patterns with a blue background and silver edges filled the entire screen as if they were alive. The terminal made a sharp buzzing sound, and I heard Raven counting rapidly in my mind. Code level 7. Sato put his hand on my shoulder. It's her blog. Her voice trembled. 3 days before Xiaolin's death, there was a record of her logging in the server log, but the content was encrypted by the founding team. Text suddenly popped up on the screen. May 12, 2018. They said it was a moral experiment. I was chosen to test the newly developed group decision-making system. When 100 strangers vote on whether to reveal a person's privacy, the code will be automatically executed. On the first day, the target was a cheating lawyer. The voting interface is red, and the public option accounts for the system posted his hotel check-in records on the local forum. His wife and child were making a scene outside the law firm. I stared at the surveillance footage with my palms sweaty, but they say it is people's justice. On the third day, the target became middle school students. Someone anonymously reported her for bullying her classmates. The voting interface turned blue, and public accounted for. The system dug out her home address and her mother's medical records. I saw her hiding in the bathroom, crying backstage, digging her nails into her palms. They said minors should also be held responsible for mistakes. On the 5th day, I found that I couldn't click on the objection option. System prompt. Your credit score is insufficient. I went to the project manager, and he patted me on the shoulder and laughed. Xiaolin, you see, when the majority of people think it is right, the minority of opponents seem to be covering up the crime. Today I logged into the back end and saw the audience list. It turns out that from day one, I wasn't a tester, I was an actor. They need someone who believes he is doing justice. To prove the fairness of the system, the real audience are those who hide behind the code and pay for the public option. They said they would give me a higher level of authority, but I found 23 actors like me in the database. Their endings were: 2 went crazy, 5 quit, and were cyberbullied to the point of committing suicide, and the rest were still clicking public on the screen. If I die one day, remember that the name of this system should not be mirror speaker. It should be called an echo chamber. Whatever you shout, it repeats until everyone is deaf. The terminal screen suddenly went black. Sato's hand slid down from my shoulder. She was the first to discover the actor mechanism. Her voice was like broken glass, so they faked her accident. But she gave me the chip and said that if the system ever starts killing people, give it to someone who can break the rules. The phone vibrated in my palm. I cut it open and saw Carl Lehman's face. He sat in a gold-plated office in Switzerland, with a screen behind him filled with jumping coordinates. "Thank you, Eleanor." His smile was like a knife. "You let us see the power of the actors. When they think they are doing justice, they will even hand over the codes of their loved ones." The screen switches to a global map. The lights of Tokyo, New York, and London lit up at the same time. There was a name next to each light spot. Claire Novak, Mark Reynolds, Eileen Carter. All of them were people who had recently been looking up the Rose Garden and Hunter Theater. The final trial begins. Carl's voice was mixed with the noise of electricity. "In 3 hours their privacy will be posted all over the dark web, and you will watch them like your sister." Light. A new message pops up. It was an encrypted text message from Eileen Carter, with a hint of blood between the lines. "Marcus activated the Black Crow but physically destroyed the Tokyo node. But Sato said it would be scattered into pieces. You have 10 seconds to make a decision." I looked up at Sato. She was staring at the last line written by Charlotte on the screen. "Until everyone is deaf. It can't be blown up." She dug her fingers into the console. The backup servers of Black Crow Bay are hidden in the civilian networks of 37 countries. If we blow up one, the rest will be triggered automatically. What should I do then? I heard my voice shaking. She pointed to the chip slot on the terminal. "Your sister's permission code," she said. "The founding team has a hidden command. Reset. It's not deletion. It's reversing all data back to the origin, including the actor's memory, the audience's account, and all marked targets." "What about Carl and the others?" "You will become an ordinary user." She forced a wry smile. "But the secrets in the system, including the new location of the Rose Garden and the protective umbrella of the organ traffickers, will all be sealed in the initial code. It will take 10 years to dig them out again." I reached for the chip. Xiaolin's name was engraved on the metal, which was a bit uncomfortable to touch. 10 years ago, when she sat next to me at a lecture and said, "Code should not have the power of judgment," her tone was similar. The terminal pops up a prompt box. "Are you sure you want to reset mirror speaker?" I stared at the OK button. In the retinal projection, the Raven was flashing wildly. Remaining time for Tokyo node to start, 2 hours and 53 minutes. "Okay." I pressed. The entire server suddenly went quiet. All screens go off simultaneously. The sound of rain in the ventilation duct became clear, dripping on the operating table, like someone typing in Morse code. Then, a line of white words lit up on the middle screen. "The trial ends, and the truth begins." Sato suddenly grabbed my wrist. Her nails almost dug into her flesh as she pointed at the corner of the screen, where a tiny cursor was flashing like a beating heart. "That is the heartbeat of the backup protocol." Her face turned blue in the white light. "Carl didn't tell us everything. Resetting can terminate Black Pro birth, but the live broadcast source of Hunter Theater." My phone vibrated again. It was a message from Mark. "Claire's puzzle has been solved. The coordinates point to the warehouse in Area 17 of the port, but the surveillance shows that Lucas Wyland moved a server in half an hour ago." I grabbed my coat and rushed to the door. The rain was still falling, hitting my face like ice. Raven whispered in his mind. "Port Area 17, 12 kilometers from here. Time remaining 2 hours and 47 minutes. The white words on the screen were still there, like a gaping wound. "The truth begins." That's the end of tonight's story. Thank you for listening. Have a good sleep. Good night, dear wanderer.